All right, so let's talk about some of the ways that men lose their power in dating and relationships. And the first thing to talk about is that in the mainstream, with a lot of mainstream advice, you'll hear a lot of emphasis on communication. Like communication is key. Communicate, communicate, communicate. And the thing is that communication is important, but it's not the whole story. And with more alpha male type of content, you will see the opposite. You'll see an overemphasis on the power element and controlling things, and that is also wrong. It's too far in the other direction. Either extreme is not the right way to do things. Like most things in life, it's more about the balance of things. If you don't have any communication, you're not gonna have much of a relationship. And if you completely ignore the power dynamic, you're just going to be oblivious to what's going on and find yourself in a bad spot that you don't want to be in. So you need to have awareness and implementation of both. And the first point I want to bring up is one of the most obvious, but it is often the most ignored. It's kind of ironic. And that is the fact that the selection process determines a lot of what will happen in that relationship. The idea is you want to pick someone who has genuine desire for you. The selection process is incredibly important. And the person that you select is obviously going to play a massive role in what happens from there. And it sounds like such simple advice. Just pick someone who has genuine desire and actually likes you for you. But if you look at a lot of the relationships around you or a lot of the relationships in the world that don't have a good dynamic, a lot of it just traces back to making a bad selection off the bat, starting bad. So you want to keep in mind that you will finish how you start, and you want to make sure that you start strong in order to finish strong. Another reason this is important to bring up is because the selection process for a long-term relationship is different than casual dating per se, or if you're just trying to get hookups or whatever stuff that's more in the short term, maybe the mid-term, maybe like a friends with benefits kind of thing. It's a different selection process. So what I mean by that is when you're just casually dating or you're looking for hookups, full-blown compatibility isn't a big deal. Really what you're screening for is just a woman that you're attracted to and that you can tolerate being around or like being around. The reason I say tolerate being around is I'm sure you've come across a girl that maybe you weren't crazy about in terms of what she brings to the table in terms of her personality, but she might have just been really attractive. And that type of thing can fly with casual dating, but it's not gonna fly with long-term relationships if you want a solid relationship. It's just not gonna work. You have to be much more strict with your screening process. You must vet much more intensely than just, oh, she's hot. And that's actually one of the issues with a lot of this stuff where a lot of guys just want to date like the 9s and the 10s. Like, where are the hot girls at, It's like, physical attractiveness is important. I'm never going to downplay that. A woman has to meet the sexual attractiveness threshold for you in order for you to have a fulfilling relationship, and in order for her to also have a fulfilling relationship too, because if you're not attracted to her, it's not going to be fulfilling for her either. But this whole idea of like, where are the 9s and the 10s at, it's just screening for the wrong thing off the bat. Like, there's so much more to a relationship than just the girl being a 9 or a 10. There has to be that compatibility element to where she adds a lot of value to your life, and she's willing to follow your program. Most of all, she has to be on your program, and that starts with the selection process. Another thing about this idea of, how do I get the hot girls? How do I get the 9s and the 10s? Is guys tend to just overly focus on who they want rather than who wants them. And when it comes to relationships, that is going to get you killed. If you just overly focus and tunnel vision on the girls that you want, you're going to miss a lot of the women that would want you, that you would have a great relationship with. You get addicted to this idea of the superficial, of having the trophy girl on your arm, having the hot girl, and you think in your mind that that's going to be the fulfilling thing, but that's just not the whole story. That's not the thing that matters the most when it comes to a relationship. A girl being hot but a nightmare is not going to sustain your life. You're just going to have a pretty headache on your hands, and it's going to drive you crazy, and it could lead to some pretty bad outcomes, if things go a certain way. So something to keep in mind there is to have a more balanced view in the selection process and not just screen for the 9s and the 10s. Like, it just sounds ridiculous even saying it out loud, but a lot of guys do this because we are so physical, right? I understand it. I like beautiful women just as much as the next guy, but you have to have more to the screening process than just that. So when we're talking about how men lose power, One of the easiest ways and the fastest ways that guys lose power is in the selection process. They choose the wrong girl. They choose a girl who doesn't really like them like that. So right away, you're starting off with friction and resistance, and it's only gonna get worse from there. One of the most common mistakes I see when I talk to guys is they start off with a woman who's giving resistance off the bat in all kinds of different ways, and they think that it's going to get better the more they get to know her, but it's only going to get worse. I'll tell you this, the thing to keep in mind is that the beginning of the interaction and relationship with the woman is the easiest part of the entire thing. If you have resistance off the bat or something just doesn't feel right, you need to pay attention to that and follow that, because there's a good chance that there's an error in your selection process, and it's going to lead you down this path to where you're with a woman who's contentious and takes the power completely and just dominates the entire relationship dynamic. Another important part of the selection process is choosing a woman who loves to see you win and avoiding women who are competitors. And women who are competitors are actually more common than you would think. These are exactly the types of women that it sounds like. These are the women that want to compete with you rather than celebrate your wins. They don't want to see you genuinely win. They want to go toe to toe with you in a way. They want to compete in all different kinds of ways. I've seen this manifest in a variety of ways, honestly. I've seen women compete with complaints. Like, let's say the guy has a bad day. She might start competing and say that, her day was even worse. There's those types of people. And then there's also the type that, they compete in terms of career or accomplishment. Maybe you get a promotion, or maybe you start a business and it's doing well, and now she feels like she just wants to compete with you rather than being genuinely happy for your success. She feels like she has to match that success or outdo you in a way. You want to avoid women like this like the plague. They just bring stress and they just add nothing to your life. It's just going to make things more difficult for you. You want to look for the women who genuinely celebrate your wins and they really want to see you win. Besides the obvious reasons of having a woman who genuinely wants to see you win and cheering you on and all the positives that come with that, the larger signal there is that a woman who does that is fully on your program. She is down with following your lead. A woman who's a competitor is more contentious. She's not fully following your lead. It's only partially, if at all, and it's going to cause you a lot of problems. So you want to screen for these types of women who genuinely want to see you win. It's a huge, huge factor. And when I talk about following your lead, it's such a huge part of all of this. You have to remember that you're in a leadership position. It's not just this gooey romantic thing, because once the newness wears off, whatever dynamic that you created at the beginning is going to carry you the rest of the way. Now, it's not just a set it and forget it type of thing, and I'm going to talk more about that in a second, but how you start is how you finish. I can't emphasize this enough. And if you start off bad, it's only going to get worse from there. So off the bat, with your screening and your vetting process, it has to be strict. It has to be a woman who wants to see you win. It has to be a woman who wants to follow your lead. And you always have to keep in mind that you are in a leadership position. Never lose sight of that. Do not forget that. And that job never ends as long as you're in that relationship. But in general, there is a huge amount of problems that could be avoided by just selecting better from the start. Like I was saying before, it's a simple idea, but it is so crucial. And so many guys are still overlooking it or letting things slide early on in the process and not recognizing the larger signal there that it's just a bad selection, and you need to follow that gut feeling and pay attention to those signals. Now, the next one is losing all the little battles along the way that add up to you ultimately losing power in that relationship and the woman taking over. And as a side note, we're out here in front of the state capitol, guys. We made it. We are official. And this is where they legislate power. And I'm doing my best to make sure that you guys stop giving away yours to women that don't even like you in the first place. But a huge part of losing power in dating and relationships with women is ignoring all the little things along the way. And then you find yourself in a spot where you ask yourself, all right, how did I even get here to start with? How did I end up here? Things seemed like they were good before, and now it's just stress every single day. And this woman is just acting masculine as hell. She's taking over things. She's contentious. She's combative. And everything's just problematic. And again, it goes back to the selection process, but also not ignoring the details all along the way. You're going to be faced with dozens, hundreds, thousands of situations that require you to be on point. And that goes back to the idea that I was telling you before, that you're in a leadership position. If you're a leader, a CEO of a company, that job just doesn't stop. Like, you are expected to lead this whole thing while you're employed at that company. You have to continue leading. You might get calls off the clock. You're gonna have people coming to you with problems. You're gonna have to handle all of this stuff, because it's that whole idea of, heavy is the head that wears the crown. There's a lot of responsibility that comes with being a leader, and a relationship is no different. The issue is that guys don't take it serious enough, though. And that's when they find themselves in these positions to where they lose power in the relationship. They lose that leadership position, because if you're not fulfilling the leadership position in a solid way, the woman's gonna step in and do it herself, and she's gonna resent you for it. So you always wanna keep that in mind. Like, you have to be on point at all times. That's part of the role that you play as the man in the relationship, as the leader in the relationship. And this is also why your vetting process should be extensive. You don't want to just rush into a relationship with a girl. You have to know exactly what you're getting into, and if this woman is actually a good fit for your life, and if you want to step into this position of being in a relationship and being the leader of that relationship. You have to get enough data points, so to speak, to get a good read on the situation and figure out if this is actually right for you or not. But it's another issue, is guys will just rush into relationships a lot of the time. And when it comes to all these little battles along the way, and when I say battles, I don't want you to think that I'm viewing a relationship as this adversarial thing. It's not that. You don't want to view the woman as your adversary. It's not that. But there's these little battles even against yourself. There's things that will test your manhood and will test if you are a good leader. Are you actually fit for the position? Can you actually lead a relationship? Can you lead a woman? Can you lead a family? There's a lot of traits that you have to develop in order to become a man fully, and a man who's worthy of that position. It's not just this thing that you just step into, for fun and you just wing it, at least if you want to do it right. If you want to have a solid relationship, if you want to have a solid relationship dynamic to where a woman looks up to you and admires you, and she respects you and has that genuine desire for you. So there's going to be all these moments along the way that you have to display good leadership ability, good masculinity, being non-reactive, being the rock in the storm, so to speak. You have to be stable throughout the whole thing and make good decisions. And another reason this is so important is because as the man in the relationship, you are essentially displaying the traits that tells the woman that you can lead her somewhere that she can't go on her own. And the woman's going to admire you for that. So going back to the selection process, you want to nail that. And part of nailing the selection process is picking a woman who admires you. Admiration is huge. A woman wants to look up to you. She wants to admire you. So you have to pick a woman who fits that bill. If she doesn't admire you, if she doesn't look up to you, if she doesn't respect you like that, the relationship is going to be a pain in the ass. The power dynamic is going to be completely screwed up because she can't look up to you. A woman has to be able to look up to you for things to flow smoothly. And this comes back to the leadership dynamic again. If you're not a leader worth following, she's not going to look up to you. And there goes the power dynamic. And then what happens from there is all these little situations that pop up over time, it's just going to be disastrous. Because let's say you have a situation where she's doing something that you don't like and you want that to stop, or you want to give your 2 cents or have a discussion about it. She's not going to listen to you because she doesn't have any admiration for you. She doesn't respect you. She doesn't view you as a leader worth following. So the power dynamic is going to be completely screwed up again. And there's going to be moments in a relationship where there's things that pop up and you cannot let them slide. You're going to have to address those things or check those things, because otherwise, if you don't, you're going to create a monster. And creating a monster is a thing that a lot of guys do all the time inadvertently. Usually what happens is when you create a monster, it's the result of a ton of little moments and all the details adding up. It's not one big event. It's not like she just goes from being this peaceful little angel to being a monster overnight. It's all the little details that add up, which is why you have to pay attention to those details. And what I'll see sometimes is guys writing off little things that happen. They'll just kind of brush it off and be like, oh, she's just in a bad mood, or, I'm not going to make a big deal out of that. Or they'll get this feeling of maybe they want to say something, but I just want to keep the peace, and, I don't want to mess up the vibe tonight, or whatever the reason is. But they'll let all these little things slide, and then it turns into this situation to where all of a sudden you get to a point where you've built a monster and it's all your fault. So understand, if you get to a point in a relationship where things are going bad, a lot of the time it's your fault. Most of the time it's your fault. You had a series of decisions that you could have made along the way and you just didn't make them. Now, sometimes that can be out of ignorance. Maybe you just didn't know any better. But the point is that you are shaping your future with a woman because of your leadership position, because of the selection process, because of all these little things that happen along the way. So you have to pay attention. The details matter. The details are huge with women. And what's interesting about the idea of not creating a monster is this is something that even women told me growing up. I think back to the advice that my mother and my grandma gave me growing up, and they'd always tell me, like, be careful, don't create a monster. You know, you gotta check certain things. You gotta maintain that position of being the man in the relationship. So, you know, this is something that women are highly aware of, and it's something that guys overlook all the time. And another thing that happens because of that, because of guys overlooking things, is that women will carry over programming from the other men that they've been with in their life. And also like their father figure, men in their family, so on and so forth. But women do carry over programming from the other men that they've been with. So when you get with a girl for the first time, she's gonna bring over certain things that she's experienced in other relationships in terms of like her programming, how she treats men, how she behaves. So it's not gonna be this perfect plug and play thing where everything's just perfect. There's going to be points in the relationship where you have to say something. You got to check certain things. And again, that comes down to that respect factor. And if she doesn't respect you, it's just going to go badly, you know? So this is going to keep connecting back to that selection process. That's why I outlined it first, because it's such a huge part of the puzzle. Your vetting process has got to be on point when it comes to relationships. I just can't state it enough. And another thing about the programming is sometimes you gotta put a girl on game, essentially. You gotta teach her the right way to do things sometimes, because other men have let things slide. However, there is a limit though. There are some women where it's just a fixer-upper. It's just a fixer-upper type of project, and it's not worth the time. It's worth selecting better from the start. And one last note on this point, and why it's important to pay attention to the details, is because some of these women out here, if you give them an inch, they will not take a mile. They will take 10 miles. They will run away with that little detail that you let slide. So be on point. Now, the next way that guys lose power in dating and relationships is your SMV is not on an upward trajectory. You get lazy, you let things backslide, you get comfortable, so on and so forth, but there's also more to the story than just that. The reason why I say there's more to the story than just that is because high SMV alone isn't going to solve everything. High SMV alone isn't just going to create this amazing relationship and then you're just set from there. However, having this upward trajectory to your SMV does some of the work passively for you. And one of the things that it does passively for you is it allows you to have more options, right? It doesn't matter if you're exercising those options or not. A woman can look at you and understand if other women want you or not. She can understand that you could potentially go get another woman if this relationship were to fall apart. And the opposite is also true. A woman can look at you and think, yeah, no one else is gonna want this guy. Or, yeah, if I left right now, this guy would be screwed and he would have no one else. So when you're on a constant upward trajectory with your SMV, it's this built-in power into the relationship dynamic that creates a certain level of respect. Again, it doesn't fix everything. It's not just, like you're just this high SMV guy and you can just kick your feet up and you're just done from there. It doesn't fix everything. But again, like I was saying earlier, you want to have everything working for you because relationships are challenging and they take work over time. They take constant work. So you want to have as many attributes on your side as possible. And SMV is one of those things that is largely in your control, or it's pretty much entirely in your control, except certain things with your looks. Like you can't change like your facial structure and, things like that. But most other things with SMV are completely in your control. So you want to make sure that you're covering your foundations with that and you have everything in place to where you're on this constant trajectory over time. Another thing to keep in mind too is that the more options a person has, the more power they generally have. This is why beautiful women tend to dominate interactions, because men can look at a woman who's a 9 and they know that she has options. It's like this underlying thing that you know this girl is very beautiful, you find her very attractive, and she's got a lot of options. So if you're able to obtain her, it says something about you. It makes you feel good. You have the trophy girl on your arm. You feel like other people will respect you too for being able to pull such an attractive woman. And when I talk about options and having that abundance, I don't just mean being able to get other girls whenever you want. That is part of it. But it's this idea that you have an abundant life, or could have an abundant life, with or without this woman. That is really true abundance. It's not just about having a bunch of girls around you. It's about having this life that you'd be fine with or without a woman. That projects a lot of power. And that plays into this whole idea of having options. You have the option to have a woman in your life or not, but either way, you are good. Now, another reason why your SMV being on an upward trajectory is important is because women notice this. They notice all these things, even if it doesn't seem like they're paying attention. They have their eye on you in that regard. There's this thing about your SMV being on an upward trajectory that inspires the other person one way or another, and it'll tell you a lot about that person. So let's say you get in a lot better shape and the woman doesn't do anything. She doesn't improve herself at all, right? Maybe she's got a few pounds that she should be losing, but she's just not following suit and not following your lead in that regard, and she's not being inspired to improve herself. Well, that tells you a lot about that relationship and whether or not that's actually a good fit for you. And you'll see this all the time. I've seen couples where one person gets in really good shape, the other person in the relationship doesn't, and then they end up splitting up because it's such a big difference in lifestyle. And also it communicates a lot in terms of respect. Now on the upside, if she gets inspired to get even better herself, then that can be a good sign to the relationship, right? Depending on the other factors as well. But it is something to pay attention to, and it's something to keep in mind that you want your SMV to be on an upward trajectory because it is a form of power in and of itself. And it also ties into my other point about how I was talking about how women can look at you and know if you have options or not. And if you're on an upward trajectory, oh, they get the point. They understand that you have other options and that you're becoming more attractive. And then the opposite is also true too. So where if your SMV is on a downward trajectory or on a downward trend, she's going to lose respect for you over time. And again, you're going to find yourself at a point where you go, what happened? And what happened was you let yourself go. And this is an important thing to stress because guys specifically are susceptible to becoming mentally complacent in relationships and thinking that everything is fine when things aren't actually fine. And that's because guys just tend to ignore a lot of the details by default. So always pay attention to these things. Now, one more thing I want to say about SMV is I want you to think about SMV in a little bit of a different way than the traditional definition of just looks, money, and status. When it comes to relationships, I also want you to think about being on this upward trajectory in terms of the positive influence that you have on her in the relationship, because ultimately you want to be at this point to where the woman looks at you and she's like, there's no way I could replace this guy. He just brings way too many positive attributes to my life. And that means making an emotional impact on her life. It's not just about, again, the looks, money, and the status. It's about different ways of impacting her life in a positive way. So this can be a variety of things. You can share wisdom with her, your experience, the things that you've learned, put her onto game in different ways, right? You're making her life better and adding value to her life. This doesn't mean supplicating to her. I'm not talking about like simping for her or something. I'm talking about adding genuine value and really being a high value guy, someone that brings those life-changing qualities to another person's life. Those are the things that make a woman or just people in general look at you and be like, there's no way we can replace this guy. He is unique. He is one of a kind. And that's the place that you want to be at in that woman's eyes. Now, it's kind of like a bonus point. I want to talk more about the leadership aspect because it's the backbone of everything we're talking about here. Or it's the backbone, I say we, like we're just having a conversation. I guess we're having a conversation, but I'm sitting here just talking to a camera. So it's the backbone of everything I'm talking about. So one thing to mention when it comes to leadership is that women test for leadership. And you've probably heard this, you're probably aware of this if you watch dating content or whatnot. You've heard about guys talking about how women test men. But there's a function behind it that is actually very useful for women. Because if you think about it, if a woman tests a man and he fails the test, that was actually a good test. It told her a lot about that guy's strength and his potential as a leader. Now, the thing to understand is that no man is immune to being tested. And every woman is going to test you at some point. You just have to spend enough time with her to see it. What matters is the degree and the frequency of the testing. If a woman is just grilling you all the time and testing you all the time, she doesn't respect you. She has a low level of respect for you. But even if a woman has a high level of respect for you, she's still going to test you at some point. So it's important to understand that if a woman can get you to be reactive, that's a signal that you are not a good leader. That is a signal that you can't be trusted to lead. So it's always been very important to be in this non-reactive state by default and hold that composure. And having good composure is the foundation that creates this dynamic to where when you speak, the woman or people, because this applies to people in general too, when you speak, they listen because you have good composure. You're not reactive. You're not quick to pull the trigger. You're not quick to be upset so easily. And this is where a lot of guys lose power when it comes to women. They're very emotionally reactive. They're easy to move. They're easy to rile up. And a woman is not going to respect that. And remember that respect is the foundation of love and her admiration. If she does not respect you, she cannot love you and she cannot admire you. And if we really just boil this down to the most concise form, women only respect strength and dominance. And that's why feminine behavior and needy behavior and emotionally reactive behavior is such a turnoff. It is the opposite of what women find attractive in terms of masculinity, in terms of poise, composure, strength, keeping it together under fire, leading and having a plan, so on and so forth. It is the opposite of all of that. Reactiveness, neediness, all that type of behavior is the opposite of those traits, and it is a massive turnoff because women only respect strength and dominance at the end of the day. And what happens a lot of the time is that guys will start off as this grounded, emotionally stable, masculine man, but then become overly focused on her emotional state as time goes on, become more reactive, start walking on eggshells, and they lose that composure. And if you fall into this trap, it's this state to where you're just reacting to her emotional state all the time and putting her emotional state first, and that inherently makes you reactive, and then her respect level for you drops. So it's extremely important to be directive instead of reactive. Essentially, if the woman feels like she's stronger emotionally than you are, you're dead. She's not going to admire you, she's not going to follow your lead, and she's not going to respect you. And she's going to end up having to lead you. And if she has to lead you, she's going to resent you for it. Now, if you're ready to take the lead in your dating life and you're ready to start building real options and to take control of your results instead of just reacting all the time, then be sure to fill out a quick application down in the description below and apply for a chance to work with me directly in my coaching program. And I will see you in the next one.